The Tale of the Project Caca. Inspired by the tales of the agency from Mr. _Cartographer and a very nice pretty please from Leah and Shade, I decided to write out the saga of the Project Caca. Hopefully this telling will forestall future blood pressure when I retell it by leaching some of the poison of it from my brain. I swear I get wound up at the thought of it every time I tell it, even at years later. I am very long-winded. This may end up being a very long read, so be warned. I am also having a glass or two of wine while writing, so make what you will of that. Now to start, I like this job. I am in fact still employed at the same company. Albeit after a merger and few acquisitions and a name change and a location change. LOL, every workplace has its Achilles heel, and this project was the one I had the misfortune of being immersed in. Most of the major players have since moved on to other jobs as well. My current leadership has been encouraging me to come to them if anything like this happens in the future, though my warnings were for naught. That encouragement has kept me at my job. Now on to the tale. I am not strictly an IT person. I ended up falling into the role of database developer and discovered that I really liked relational databases and that I loved the process of turning a pile of trivia into actual useful information that people could use to make decisions. At this job, I was slowly becoming less of a code monkey and more of what is now called data science. Though I do have love-hate relationship with statistics, so I am not officially there. We were given the project of creating an application for a division that did some custom reporting for our firm. We had lots of canned reports doing similar things, but this might be doing things like testing the waters for two clients to merge or grouping product contracts in novel ways, so it needed some high-touch analysis. This analysis was being done on Excel spreadsheets, as these things often are. Especially at the time. The problem as we were presented it, we had a few issues to be solved. Make sure the analysis used a standard methodology. Excel spreadsheets allowed each analyst to tweak their own version, and these were beginning to be a problem as different results could be found depending on the analyst assigned. Allow versioning of the reports. These were often tweaked and redone several times, and having all the versions in one neat and defined place made things easier to send the ultimate report to the customer. Unspoken to me, but apparently not on the radar really, was to make the process faster and easier. As I discovered, this not at all a consideration. As someone who fell into the profession I have through a lot of laziness and a burning desire to not do more busy work than necessary, this seems like a no-brainer to me, but alas, was not to the progenitor of this project. So, to start out with, the analysts had to be protected from us as they were far too busy to tell us about the process or how we could translate this into a standardized process. We had to glean this from meetings with the manager and no one else. Now I do not dislike this manager, but managers are not very effective if they are so far in the trenches that they can give a good account of the day-to-day processes. Not great, but not the worst. We did get some good info to get started. I was not thrilled but not truly exposed to the horrors that would come. So to start, a subset of data was pulled from a database. Cool. A little investigation told us that database pulled from a database we owned. Double cool. Let's go to the source that we know when it was last updated. Fresher data is better. Right? Hold up there, Satan. Apparently there was some special juju about this outdated copy of the database. Why was this special? We never got a straight answer, but nevertheless, we had to jump through the 7 flaming hoops of fire to get access of an outdated copy of our own damn data to get to the next step. Ironically, we were asked to run a special update to this outdated copy several times once they discovered we held the keys to get it back up to date. So we proceed to designing in the processes and formulas that were in the Excel spreadsheets. Remember, one of the explicitly stated objectives was to standardize this process so different analysts would at least start with similar reports for the same data. We spend months hashing and rehashing this so we understand all of the rules and exceptions to the rules and times when the rules are ignored, and start the process of getting the process in place. Now an analyst would select a dataset and start working. The smart way to do this would be to set a default dataset, allow the analyst to make changes if they were needed, then run it through the standard process unless there was a need to do something so custom the Excel made more sense. That would be too easy. We presented this and the brakes were quickly applied. We need more flexibility. So, standardizing the process is not okay now? Apparently it was not. How dare we try to put these calculations in the database, out of the reach of the analysts? They need more control. The calculations must be done in Excel. Sigh. So apparently we have thrown out reason number 1 for doing this project now. Months into it, no less. Unspoken reason 3 is also gone, since, if the calculations are handled in Excel, we are back to square one in time and burden on analysts. So now we are left with reason 2 as the sole reason we are spending over $500,000 on this project, over and above the salaries of FTEs like me who could be doing something useful. Was this money really effective for the only stated purpose that was left? Keeping track of versions of the report? This is where stressful project went to absolute CRP in an instant. So at this point I really started questioning what we were doing. Keeping track of versioning was something that could be better handled by SharePoint. Why were we building a whole application instead? I start floating this question up. Our biggest raison d'etre has now been invalidated and version control is no longer enough to keep us going on this road. Or so I think. Why on earth would someone state they needed consistency then kill it immediately in a desire for each analyst to have control? This is making no sense, and the data structures that are starting to come down the pipe are making less sense. At this point I start putting out the what are we really doing? Emails. I outline what we were told were the stated objectives. Point out how Objective 1 has been savaged. How Objective 3 could be achieved if the current project was completely revamped, and how Objective 2 was easily achievable with SharePoint. We have no real objectives anymore. We are floundering in a horribly complex process where we are told we are doing it wrong, but taking way too long to be told why. We would try something. Get told it was wrong, then wail a week or two to get a meeting with the manager to find out the problem was semantic or minor. All this hoping that the actual analysts would not have some completely different take. I think the worst part of the response to the what are we doing emails was not that I was wrong. No, they agreed with every point. Then declared it irrelevant without explaining why. Yes, it was true that we were not standardizing the process, but that was irrelevant. No, we were not simplifying the process, but the salespeople would have this nifty versioning control and the analysts could be ordered to use the process so it was not a burden. Then I was asked if I thought I would be blamed for the failure. I was incredibly insulted. I was doing my best to be a team player, a good steward of company resources, and I was being accused of totally self-serving SIA? Don't get me wrong, SIA has saved me many times, but there was more than enough documentation of just who orchestrated this steaming pile already. I was just trying to stop it from piling higher. There was line of projects waving fists full of money at our division trying to get us to do their projects. More useful projects too. That is when I heard the fateful words. Well, there is a lot of political pressure to do this the way they want it. I do not know the name of the progenitor of this project. I do not know what blackmail he had on the other people who had projects they wanted completed by my group. Whatever he had, it was explosive. I can only dream of this blackmail material. He managed to jump a lot people who brought millions into the company and actually had good ideas that would grow the business and benefit customers for something that was now best handled by SharePoint, and it would not stop. Now that the flex has happened, we were helpless. We could not push back against any requirement no matter how stupid. The process now evolved to new heights of idiocy. We were required to have a process that would pull records manually selected from the database into Excel. Any attempt to automate this pull was violently rejected. No matter how many manual overrides were offered, it was never enough control. So the record selection process was unchanged. Sadly, this was a high water mark. Next we exported this into Excel where each analyst would apply their own version of the massaging of this data. No standardization was allowed. The all-powerful control needed to be honored. So far so no change. Now we had to load the data from Excel back into the database. This is where things go from bad to abjectly stupid. Remember that our last, really awful, reason for doing this project is so we could keep track of multiple versions? In order to do all our calculations in Excel and reload these back into the database, the only way to do this is to overwrite the previous version of the analysis in the database. The last fig leaf has been striped from this project. All versioning still must be kept in various Excel documents and we still are not keeping them version controlled in SharePoint. Nope, we are willy-nilly just writing over a database version so we can see the software unfold the damn graphs in a pretty manner in front of a customer. Heck, let's be honest, we can't even manage that much. The pretty flowering pie chart is locked behind our firewall. Unless the customer comes on site for a presentation, they are seeing a PDF of that cool pie chart, not it unrolling in front of them. Around this point I really start drinking too much. I hated this project. It was incredibly stupid. It took loads of analyst time. The analysts were the bottleneck in this process. Remember how their time was too valuable to talk to us at the beginning. Or ever. Our time was not valuable at all /s, so we have a process that takes longer than the old process. And takes more analyst time than the old process. Is not more reproducible than the old process. Is as bad or worse at versioning than the old process. Since they are pretending it is better, they are not doing as good a job of keeping track. Has a UI that cannot be fully exploited to the target audience. PDFs were actually inferior to the Excel graphics that could be tweaked during discussions. Required retooling and retraining of existing systems and people. I focus on the analysts, but the salespeople had to adjust too. I could not see them being happy with this adjustment to an actually inferior product for their purposes. My conclusion was that a few people would use it to see the new shiny sparkly, then would quickly become disenchanted as they discovered the digital equivalent that glitter is actually craft herpes and they have to deal with this huge steaming pile in front of customers. The salespeople, who always get the management love notes, would demand the old process, and this would, at best, fade into obscurity. Taking $500,000 plus and untold amounts of productivity with it. Surprising me not in the slightest, that is exactly what happened. There were update processes that had to managed. I managed them all of 3 times. Very quickly I was the last person with institutional knowledge to kick this off. Every 6 months or so, there was an attempt to revive this. I would kick it off. They would discover why no one else was using this product and go back to Excel without the crazy useless DB process. Until someone else was told this was what they were supposed to do before they learned better. Midway through the abortive stop-start of actually using this process, my old manager revisited it. Apparently because it was not being used enough, the thought was to add more features. OMG, nobody learned it was awful gumming up of a difficult process that could have been simplified, but any attempts at making the process better were rejected resoundingly. Instead, we need a brighter shade of lipstick on this pig and it would be the best thing ever. I express this view strongly. Once again I am insulted. Well, this does not come out of our department's budget, we do not need to worry. Thankfully this died exactly as quickly and unused as I expected. It would have done far more damage if it had been forced to be used as intended. I am still angry at the utter uselessness of this in an otherwise useful and contributing company. There were real problems that needed solved in other parts of the company. There were real contributions we could have made to this division. Instead, we were blocked at every turn and all my leadership could do is bleat about political pressure.